Hi Hasita, how are you?
Good, good. So much food for thought from the last episode and been mulling over it. Yeah.
Good, good. Nice.
But good color, right?
Seeing you in that color, it brightens me
Mhm.
up. Um,
Yeah. No, we've been having, I think, some of those days where it's not so much that you put things away for a later time, but
mm,
sometimes when things go wrong, they go wrong at the same time. And it's not Murphy's Law alone, right? Like there is a
Correct.
very clear logical set of steps that have occurred in order to get to that point. And for us, I think it's definitely the expectation management with vendors, especially, right? Because we do work
Mm,
with a lot of vendors as a small agency. So
mm,
sometimes maybe we are not clear enough in articulating how we want the project to be done. The what's, whys are all, of course, there,
mm,
which
mm,
briefs cover. Proposals like go into espousals about what we are going to be doing and the why and all of that. But I think the how has been something that I feel like we need to pay so much attention to. And I was just thinking because we do work with multiple different vendors, and some of them are so hands off, right? Like the moment you
mm,
hand them a project, you know you don't have to do anything else to take care of it. And then there are some vendors whose technical depth might be great, very robust, but then you have to project manage the hell out
mm.
of those circumstances. And I mean, especially in the context of strategic thinking, can we really say that one wasn't thinking strategically and the other was? Where does that mismatch occur? Maybe both of them are thinking strategically from their standpoints. And it
Yeah.
just comes down to what you wanted on each project and how did you make that decision. Not very
Yeah.
well, hence the pink shirt, but a lesson for another day.
No, that's an interesting position to be in. Let's say you, and we talked about it last time, you've spent time thinking about your organization, taking time to think strategically how you want to structure it, who does what you want to aim for in the next few years, the kind of clients you want. But who's telling the vendor that? In the sense that they are coming
Yeah,
in as separate entities with their own vision or no vision, or doing the day to day, and how
yeah.
do you tie them into what you've thought of, what your plan is, without overdoing it, without getting into this huge bonding exercise and
Absolutely. Yeah. Because we tend
sharing.
to overcorrect on both sides. You're absolutely
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Sometimes it
yeah.
becomes a lot. Like where we've been vendors, we're like, why are you inviting us
Correct,
to these? We
correct.
we don't need to be here. But at the same time, there's also the, other end of the spectrum, which is that yes, you are the one who met them. Probably some of those
Hmm,
early relationships were established on an individual level. And now that
hmm,
there's a much larger ecosystem involved, and
hmm,
even there, it's almost like a cycle of abuse, if I may, and it goes both ways, right?
hmm,
Because I've realized that the simple act of maybe practicing empathy for both sides never happened, right?
hmm.
Like the introductions were probably made on email and said,
Yeah,
from tomorrow, this is the person that you'll be dealing with, this nameless, faceless entity
correct.
hiding behind the mailbox from a client standpoint. And from the vendor standpoint, then what happens also is, okay, anyway, it's a nameless, faceless entity. So let me,
Yeah,
treat it as a transaction that it is.
correct.
And it's interesting. I mean, maybe we are talking about how do you people manage, but at a much higher kind of, level where there are so many complex stakeholders involved.
Correct. No, because what you're saying, I can see it has happened to us so often that
Hmm.
even that conversation with empathy, that little bit of the backstory for each side, and what's my vision, what kind of work do I want to do, and what kind of work do I want to do with you in the next
Yeah.
year or 2 years, we may do it at, let's say, certain levels of leadership. And then once you say, oh, great, we align and let's work together, both sides have passed it on to two different people or teams or
Yeah.
set of
Yeah.
teams who have no clue all of this happened.
Hmm. And honestly,
That
that's where that question of look at the big picture even comes up, no? Because this person who's had this interaction and who's had this extremely complex relationship pan out over
hmm,
God knows how many days, weeks, months, is now having to do a handover to someone else, which is how systems grow. I mean, finally, you need
correct.
people to do things. But that system has not had the 6 month, 9 month, 2 year, 5 year
Yeah,
journey of,
yeah,
and so when you go back and tell them also, hey, you need to look at the big picture, I think the question that's not asked, or at least not said out loud, or maybe it comes out as yeah, right, we don't know, you know, is actually how.
yeah.
How
Yeah,
do I
no, you're
look at
right.
it?
And in a lot of work, especially B2B, whether you're an IT delivery manager, you have a client sitting in some other country, you as a marketing consultant, you have a very local client, but you still have spent 5 6 months creating that relationship. It's a long sales cycle, always,
Yeah,
right? You've discussed what they need, you've gone back and forth on proposals, capability, all of that. And also in that space, you've had some milestone celebration that they know they've broken a leg and and you've got this relationship, and then
yeah.
you hand off. And how do you pass that on to the team, or how do you build
Hmm.
that capability to continue the relationship? Because when
Yeah.
now the client asks something, someone in your team is saying, hey, no, 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 we can't do that. But you're thinking, no, I spent 6 months bringing this person to this stage,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we have to try and do that. Or this is why I know that this ask is very important for them,
To drive that,
right?
right? Because again, you
Yeah.
don't want to be spending so much time then explaining why it's important. Sometimes we think the first step is to put people in front of each other, but I feel like there's a lot of work before that work that needs to happen. And
Mm,
viscerally, my sense of that is that you're looking one at the technical skill set level competence of the individual that you're putting in
mm,
front of the client,
mm.
right? And somewhere you have to have empathy for the fact that this meeting is one among 10 things that this person is already doing.
Yeah,
Because that
yeah.
transition is always a phase of discomfort before the person can come from the execution side to the more leadership side.
Mm.
In between is that messy watercolor painting where both those worlds meet, also, right?
Correct, correct.
And that is sometimes something that, at least in my experience, when I was making a transition, there were some leaders who were very cognizant of that fact, and there
Mm.
were some who weren't. And the sense of being overwhelmed, I think the sense of being burnt out, was so much stronger with the latter, because they didn't realize that after this 1 hour of doing whatever I'm doing, the song and dance, I still have to go back and do the actual job for which I'm still on the
Yeah,
payroll.
yeah. Which is another song and dance by itself, and
Yes.
maybe actually at a higher energy level, because you're trying to enthuse this team of people that needs to deliver and
Yeah.
live up to some of the promises that you've made in your first song and dance. So, Hasita, what we're really kind of talking about now, or what we're nudging ourselves towards, is okay, I've spent time thinking about a vision, right? And
Hmm.
my vision is these kind of clients, this kind of work, this kind of growth over the next so many months, years. And with that vision, it's taken me to certain places, and I've created opportunities, leads, or I'm working on a project with that in mind. And now I'm coming across certain actual work to do, right?
Yeah.
I've made connections, and I've got a project, or I've got a client who's saying, okay, we do X with you, we want to do 2X, and this is that 2X. Now it's the bridge, like you have to bring this back to
Hmm.
your team and say, remember that strategic vision that I had? This is what it was, quick reminder, and this is how it fits in. And
Right.
so, how do we get the job done
Yeah.
in a way
Yeah.
that, and ultimately in a way that all of us feel, I'm not going to go for joy like that, maybe reaching, but at
But
least that
a
all of us
reasonable
feel,
quantum of satisfaction, I think.
yeah, like they feel that okay, it makes sense. I think let's
Yeah.
start there, that it makes sense with
Mm-hmm.
what I was promised in terms of my role here, my job here, who we are as an organization. It's making sense, and it's a story I can buy into, and now I can start putting my head down and getting things done in the interest
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
vision.
Yeah. And I mean, while we say it that way, sometimes it's difficult to, also understand, okay, how do I go do this now, right? I mean,
Yeah,
let's assume
yeah.
the team in the other room now needs to hear it. There's this one client we work with who's really quite phenomenal, and the device they use is storytelling, right?
Mm.
And the power of just a good story, and I mean just a simple story sometimes, right? Like we reached for the moon and we landed among the stars. Is like, you know,
Yeah,
it's the kind of vision that I think finally we all come to work for. As much as our everyday activities might still involve accounting, might still involve administrative stuff, might still involve the same sales that we've been doing for a long time, I think that common denominator, when it is so clear that the vision is much bigger than how many ever
yeah,
few hundred people that are here. So I think storytelling definitely seems like one great way for
yeah.
those who can and probably practice that skill set.
Yeah, there's this very overused but cute little anecdote, and I even don't even know if it's real, about when JFK, John F. Kennedy, was looking to send a man to the moon, and apparently some janitor was asked, "What are you doing?" And he didn't respond
Hmm.
that I'm cleaning or I'm keeping the place clean, but he said, "I'm part of this vision where sending a man to the moon." Right,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that's how much that story had percolated. It had become
yeah.
everybody's kind of purpose in life, in that building, in that period of time.
Because we do a lot of brand work, I think that's what we hope the brand story does finally, right?
Hmm.
Like when we hand that book over, I think our dream as consultants and folks who work on the other side is also that those stories are used in these manners across different
Yeah,
channels and told in these
yeah,
creative ways. Put on T-shirts, some larger organizations I've also seen them have these annual visioning workshops where everyone's very much part of it and everyone's in the same room, which is the most underrated thing, especially the larger the organization gets. Right?
yeah,
Sometimes we are
yeah.
just not on the same page. And I
Correct.
think for smaller teams, and especially as a first time someone who's playing a leadership role, one of the things that's really helped is to slow down,
Hmm.
honestly. Because I know that the fragility of the system or lack thereof, I don't know enough about, right?
Hmm.
So far, it's just me. How will I know whether the system and what even is the system's breaking point?
Yeah,
So, really kind of slowing down, understanding each person's skill set, knowledge, really see a lot of value in just hitting the brakes a little bit,
yeah, yeah.
understanding people, what drives them, what motivates them, also making some bad hiring choices, letting people go, right? I think it's
Correct.
all a process and the trees take their own time to grow finally.
No, very true. No, and very senior leaders, many times I hear them in coaching sessions, when the question on in the question between us is something very simple, but I hear them respond with such an aha moment, that not for the answer, but the fact that they never asked this of themselves earlier. They never
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
slowed down enough to take a breath, to step away
Yeah,
from what they're doing, and even ask themselves some of these questions, which,
absolutely.
if
Yeah.
they have the answer to for themselves, it's so much easier to then communicate to the team. Because otherwise,
Hmm.
beginning of every year, calendar year or financial year, you're saying, okay, I'm going to sit down with my team and set the goals. But where
Yeah.
is that coming from? That period prior to that needs a lot of that big picture thinking. So what do I need to achieve? What is my strategy? And then
Hmm.
of that, what subset does the team need to know about? And how
Yeah.
am I going to, like you said, story tell it? How am I going to enthuse them with this thing that I've dreamt up for
Yeah.
myself and my ecosystem?
Yeah. And then have clear benchmarks, then have clear guidelines. Of
Correct.
course, I mean,
Correct.
any organization, either you grow bigger or you grow deeper, right? Like both
Yeah.
of those are possibilities and they're
Yeah.
they're completely fair. When you're growing bigger, I mean more revenue, maybe you have certain revenue targets over a period of time. But really the grow deeper, in my experience, has been building for that skill set internally, right?
Mm.
Having enough depth in each individual so
Mm.
that the four people, and we know an organization that does this beautifully, and we've always looked up to them, wherein just the 6 to 8 people are in the system are doing some really high impact, really high
Yeah.
potential stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So I think both those opportunities exist, but clearly calling it out and telling people that we're not, maybe looking at a certain revenue number, but we
Yeah.
are certainly looking at you upskilling yourself in these three avenues so that your, contribution makes sense in the larger scheme
Correct,
of things.
correct. No, I definitely know who you're referring to. And I think now when we look back with this lens, it was very clear that even to the point of revenue, they didn't really say that revenue didn't matter, but they said right now, this
Yeah,
first year of us coming together, it's not the primary goal. But
objective. Yeah.
let's all really be clear on why we are together. We are here because this is the kind of work we want to do. So if we are
Hmm.
with an organization, we want access to all the right people, we want to go in depth with them, we want to be able to solution for them and they accept it. We don't want to do standard stuff, right?
Hmm.
We're not going to go there saying we have off the shelf products to kind of elevate your leaders or your organization. We want to first understand them and they have to give us that time and access, and we will
Yeah.
give our time, and then we will come back, think through solutions, we will really become experts in the client, right?
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
will know
Oh,
them
that's
in and
such a
out,
beautiful, yeah, yeah.
right?
Experts in the client is such a wonderful thought, actually. No, like,
Yeah, no, I mean that's
yeah,
your job, like as a consultant, even as a,
yeah.
like as a program project delivery, like whatever you call yourself,
Hmm.
when you are in service of the client slash the outcome. And okay, even the client can be your own organization, that's fine.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
do I truly understand, and then to say okay, now I know them, but and my way of working, my vision is that I really niche down and look at these three things,
Yeah.
right? And keep looking at how the people are working, how the process is working, and what they need to do. Like, really get into that, because that's how
Hmm.
I want to operate. Now, if I
Fair.
keep
Yeah.
doing that, then maybe initially the ROI is not making sense. I'm spending, 20 hours and getting paid for 10. But I'm building that expertise, and second year I'm spending 20 hours, but I'm charging the equivalent of 25 or 30, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm also moving up that kind of value chain.
Yeah. And I think in some of these divergent thoughts, sometimes, each individual's interests also start coming to the surface.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when you have these chats with the team, who's the person who's focusing on the metrics? Who's the
Hmm.
person who's probably thinking in terms of how many other people will we need? Who's the
Correct.
person thinking of maybe something that you didn't think of in the first place when you came up with this? I think these are all great indicators of where that individual's strength lies, even if the individual doesn't know it. I think
Yeah,
it provides for the leader a very good perspective on who's going to potentially be good at what. And
yeah,
nurturing that again is, in my experience, is always quite rewarding, and it almost counterintuitively, but it ensures loyalty for a long
yeah.
time.
No, definitely. The loyalty aspect is so taken care of, and I mean, you'll still have, people issues. You're not living in utopia. You'll still have maybe
Yeah,
compensation or, the kind of team they're in, or there will be issues, but the loyalty to that vision, if you are able to really
achieve.
kind of
Yeah.
get from them, then yeah, it like you said, like that little bit of joy that is possible.
A little bit. Maybe fewer bright colored t-shirts will be needed all around.
So true, so true. And I think this is a perfect example of that need for communicating the strategic vision. I mean, God knows you've put in a lot of hours of thinking
Yeah.
into it, hopefully, and it means something to you. And how do you get the buy-in of the people most critical to deliver on that
Yeah.
promise? I think is important. And this is a great segue to what we wanted to talk about, and we'll talk about next is what are those actual tools to use, right?
Yeah, yeah. And because there are so many.
There are
And
so many.
sometimes in the thinking of things, we don't realize that these are actually the strategic tools. Like they've just been taught in business school, perhaps, and then,
Correct.
maybe very organically we've gravitated to two or three of those at the expense of
Yeah,
everything else.
yeah,
God knows I have. So I think it's interesting to really drill down and explore why do we have to think in these different ways? Why do we
yeah.
have so many books on strategy and management?
Correct,
Because someone's inventing a new concept on a daily basis. It's not that the
correct.
knowledge isn't there. The question really is how do we use it for different use cases,
Yeah,
right?
and that's the thing. These tools also are not, one tool fits all. And only
Yeah.
when you know a few and you have a few in your toolkit, then you say, hey, this needs this kind of tool. Like, this needs a SWOT, this needs a 5W, this is a blue ocean
Hmm.
situation. But you have to know
Yeah,
a few of them to then start using them. And we'll do
that's
that
true.
next
Yeah,
week.
we'll do that. Yeah, yeah.